June 1942. A walled-off section of a General Motors factory in Anderson, Indiana. 300 workers, according to production records, operate around the clock under sworn secrecy, forbidden from discussing their work with anyone, including their families. They are not building car parts. They are building pistols. Crude, ugly, single-shot pistols with smooth bore barrels and stamped steel frames. Pistols designed to be manufactured faster than they can be reloaded. The assembly line reportedly produces one complete weapon every 6.6 seconds. By the end of August, they will have built approximately 1 million of them. The project has no official name. Internal documents call the barrel a tube, the trigger is a yoke, the firing pin is a control rod. The official designation, FP-45, stands for Flare Projector, Caliber 45, a deliberate lie designed to make Axis intelligence believe it is merely a signaling device. The workers call it something else. They call it the Woolworth pistol, because at $2.10 per unit, it costs less than a decent pair of shoes. The plan is audacious. Drop these pistols by the hundreds of thousands across occupied Europe, arm every farmer, every shopkeeper, every ordinary citizen with the means to kill a German soldier at close range. The theory holds that even if the Germans recover most of them, they will never know how many they did not find. Garrison troops will face great mental anguish, distrusting every civilian. The occupation will become psychologically unbearable. Germany will need to divert thousands of troops to rear area security. The war will be shortened through pure terror. That was the theory. Here is what actually happened. Only a fraction of the 1 million pistols manufactured were ever distributed to resistance fighters. Estimates vary and surviving records are patchy. The majority was scrapped, melted, or dumped at sea after the war. And despite decades of searching by historians and collectors, no confirmed, documented combat kill has ever been authenticated in the archival and specialist literature. The FP-45 Liberator may be the most manufactured military firearm with no verified operational effectiveness in history. But that is not the strangest part. The strangest part is that the legend became more powerful than the reality ever could have been. The myth of German terror, the stories of Nazi officers looking over their shoulders, the tales of resistance assassinations in occupied France. Nearly all of it appears to have been constructed after the war ended. This is the story of a weapon that failed at its intended purpose, and then succeeded beyond imagination at something else entirely. Terrorizing not German soldiers in 1943, but American gun collectors in 1993. The Liberator did not win the war, but it won something far more enduring. It won its own legend. The problem, the Liberator, was meant to solve seemed straightforward. By early 1942, Germany controlled most of continental Europe. Occupation forces were spread thin across France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Norway, Denmark, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, and Greece. Resistance movements existed in all these countries, but they lacked weapons. The British Special Operations Executive and the American Office of Strategic Services were para-dropping Sten guns and explosives to partisan groups, but demand vastly exceeded supply. The Joint Psychological Warfare Committee proposed a different approach. Instead of arming organised resistance cells with quality weapons, they would arm the entire civilian population with disposable ones. The concept did not require the pistols to be effective in any traditional military sense. They needed only to exist, and to be known to exist. A single-shot contact-distance assassination tool would allow any civilian to kill one German soldier, and take his weapon. More importantly, the mere possibility of armed civilians would force the Germans to treat every occupied citizen as a potential assassin. Psychological warfare through industrial manufacturing. The man who made this concept physically possible was George Hyde, a German-born American firearms designer working for General Motors' Inland Manufacturing Division. Hyde had previously designed the M3 grease gun submachine gun, a weapon already notable for simplified production. For the Liberator project, he went further. He stripped away everything that made a pistol a pistol. The result measured 5.5 inches long and weighed 1 pound. It fired a single 45 ACP round through an unrifled smooth-bore barrel, essentially a steel tube spot welded to a stamped frame. The smooth bore meant bullets would begin tumbling shortly after leaving the muzzle. Accuracy beyond 4 yards was essentially random. Beyond 25 feet, hitting a man-sized target became a matter of luck rather than skill. This was not a design flaw, it was deliberate cost engineering. Rifling machinery was expensive. The Liberator needed to be cheaper than the ammunition it fired. The reload process bordered on absurd. After firing, the user would pull back the zinc cocking piece, rotate it 90 degrees, lift the hinged breech plate, insert a wooden dowel through the muzzle to push out the spent casing, manually load a fresh round, close the breech, and rotate the cocking piece back into position. This took over 30 seconds, several times longer than the reported assembly time per pistol. The complete kit included the pistol, a waxed cardboard box, a wooden ejector dowel, 10 rounds of Frankfurt Arsenal 45 ACP ammunition, and a 12-panel instruction sheet. The instructions contained no words whatsoever. Entirely pictographic, they were designed to be understood regardless of nationality or literacy. Notably, none of the basic principles of marksmanship were addressed. The weapon was designed for contact-distance assassination, not aimed fire. General Motors treated the project with extraordinary secrecy. Guide Lamp Division, which normally manufactured automotive headlights and turn signals, had zero firearms experience. This was considered an advantage. Workers who did not know what a proper pistol looked like would not question the crude design. Multiple GM facilities contributed parts. Frigidaire chambered barrels at 600 per hour. Saganor steering gear made barrel bushings. Detroit Transmission produced barrel collars. Guide Lamp handled final assembly. Every pistol was test-fired at least once, consuming over 1.5 million rounds of ammunition. Contemporary test reports and later recollections mention handling accidents during production and proof firing, though specific casualty claims that exist in collector lore lack consistent official corroboration. Now, before we see what happened when these pistols reached the war, if you are enjoying this deep dive into wartime manufacturing, consider subscribing. It takes a second, costs nothing, and helps the channel grow. Alright, let us get into the distribution and the myth. Here is where the Liberator story diverges from its legend. The weapons were built, the theory was sound, at least on paper, but theatre commanders refused to implement the plan. General Eisenhower's staff never saw the practicality in mass dropping the Liberator over occupied Europe. Of 500,000 pistols shipped to Britain in October 1942, Eisenhower authorized fewer than 25,000 for possible emergency use, roughly 5%. His stated reasoning was that air resources were better utilized dropping bombs on the enemy, rather than pistols to civilians. The logistics supported his skepticism. British Whitley bombers could carry approximately 600 pistols per mission. Distributing 500,000 would require over 800 dedicated flights, a significant diversion from strategic bombing at a time when every aircraft mattered. Generals Stilwell and MacArthur in the Pacific were similarly unenthusiastic. Only MacArthur eventually requested 50,000 units, making the Pacific the only theatre with documented meaningful distribution. 8,000 reached native villages in the Solomon Islands. Some were delivered by submarine to the Philippines. Original pistols have been recovered there, confirming actual distribution. The OSS received 450,000 Liberators transferred from the army, but preferred to supply resistance fighters with more effective weapons whenever possible. They never made any large-scale effort to distribute them. What about France? The stories of French resistance fighters assassinating German officers with Liberators are among the most persistent elements of the legend. Ralph Hagen, whose 1996 book The Liberator Pistol remains the definitive study, conducted extensive interviews with American, British and German military intelligence personnel, OSS and SOE operatives, and French resistance fighters. His conclusion was unambiguous. He found no written evidence showing that the FP-45 was ever distributed in any significant quantity in France. The French Maquis received over 85,000 Sten guns paradropped in 1944. They received thousands of other weapons, explosives and supplies. The Liberator was irrelevant to French resistance operations. The fate of undistributed Liberators reveals the program's failure. Specialist collectors and ordnance summaries report that hundreds of thousands were scrapped, melted or dumped at sea after the war. Some sources estimate over 400,000 disposed of in this manner, though precise official disposal records are incomplete. Large shipments to India were reportedly dumped in the Indian Ocean rather than distributed. Now we arrive at the question that matters most for this story. Did the Liberator actually terrify Nazi officers across Europe, as the legend claims? The evidence suggests it did not, because the evidence does not exist. No Wehrmacht orders mentioning the Liberator have been produced by any researcher. No Gestapo policy documents addressing the threat of concealed American pistols have been cited. No German security memoranda warning garrison troops about civilian assassination weapons have been authenticated. The Bundesarchiv contains extensive German military records, but no one has found German assessments of the Liberator threat within them. The Nazi officers were terrified narrative appears in American gun publications and collector forums, never with German documentary evidence to support it. The psychological warfare concept was indeed part of the original 1942 planning justification. The Joint Psychological Warfare Committee genuinely theorized that German awareness would create mental anguish, but this theory was never tested at scale, because the weapons were never distributed in quantity sufficient to create awareness. There is exactly one widely cited first-hand account of a Liberator kill. A German military policeman named Niklaus Lange allegedly witnessed a Panzer officer's assassination on the morning of D-Day. He reportedly called the weapon a Browning assassination pistol, and claimed there were thousands in circulation in occupied France. This source has serious problems. The account appears in D-Day Through German Eyes by Holger Eckertz, a book multiple historians consider likely fabricated. Historian Giles Milton told the Times that there is no record of any of the soldiers in any other publication. The publisher has no other titles. The author's name appears in no German phone directories. The German National Library has no record of the book. The only cited eyewitness account of a Liberator kill comes from a book historians consider potentially invented. The Baltimore Police Museum states the matter plainly. There are no documented instances of any Japanese or Nazi occupation trooper actually being killed by a resistance fighter or guerrilla armed with a Liberator pistol. Ian McCollum of Forgotten Weapons concludes that the Liberators did not ultimately have any measurable impact on the war effort. The evidence gap has legitimate explanations. The weapon had no serial numbers and no manufacturer markings, making it deliberately untraceable. Resistance fighters did not keep records that could be captured. The weapon was meant to be used once and discarded. Hundreds of thousands of pistols were dumped at sea, and records were likely destroyed with them. But absence of evidence is not evidence of use. The single wartime photograph showing an FP-45 in theatre depicts it in the waistband of an Asian man in Kunming, China. Not exactly compelling combat documentation. The British took a fundamentally different approach to covert assassination weapons. The Special Operations Executive developed the Welrod silenced pistol through opposite philosophy. Where the Liberator prioritized quantity and psychological theory, the Welrod emphasized quality and documented effectiveness. The Welrod achieved 73 decibels of sound reduction, no louder than a finger snap. It had a rifled barrel with reasonable accuracy to 30 yards in daylight. It was designed for trained SOE and OSS operatives rather than untrained civilians. Only approximately 2,800 were manufactured during the war, compared to 1 million Liberators. The critical difference is documentation. The Welrod has confirmed use in World War II, the Falklands, Northern Ireland and Vietnam. It remained in British service for decades. The weapon built for professionals left a professional record. The weapon built for amateurs left only legends. SOE ultimately decided not to distribute any Liberators in France. They chose steam guns for partisan warfare and Welrods for targeted assassinations. The British invested in effective tools for trained agents, rather than mass distribution of marginal weapons. The profound irony of the Liberator program is this. The weapon designed to win through psychological effect achieved its greatest psychological impact, not on German soldiers during the war, but on American collectors decades afterward. Original FP-45s command $1,700 to $5,000 depending on condition and completeness. Fewer than 300 original waxed cardboard boxes are estimated to survive. The packaging can equal the pistol's value. One unopened 1942 box with complete kit exists, worth more than many antique rifles. The terror narrative grew primarily in post-1970s popular accounts, spreading through collector communities, gun magazines, and eventually internet forums. The timing suggests post-war romanticization, rather than wartime reality. When someone in Langley remembered those long-gone Liberators in the early 1960s, the CIA commissioned the Deer gun for Vietnam. Russell Moore designed a lighter, cheaper 9mm version. Only 1,000 were manufactured in 1964. After the Kennedy assassination, Congress passed laws requiring destruction of clandestine devices. Almost all Deer guns were destroyed. An estimated 10 to 25 originals survive, selling for over $20,000. The fundamental flaw was never the Liberator's design. It was the concept itself. Both weapons became obsolete when conflicts escalated from covert to conventional warfare. Neither proved practical. Both were psychological warfare concepts that never succeeded as actual combat tools. Return with me to that General Motors factory in Anderson, Indiana. June 1942. 300 workers building approximately 1 million pistols in 11 weeks. They believed they were arming the resistance. They believed their crude, ugly $2 weapons would strike fear into the heart of the Nazi occupation. They believed in the theory of psychological warfare through industrial manufacturing. The theory was never tested. The weapons were never distributed at scale. The German officers were never terrified, at least not by Liberators. The resistance fighters of France made do with steam guns, which actually worked. But here is what those workers could never have predicted. 80 years later, their 5.5-inch stamped steel pistols would sell for thousands of dollars. Their waxed cardboard boxes would be worth more than the weapons inside them. Their wordless instruction sheets would hang framed in collectors' homes. The Liberator failed at everything it was designed to do. It succeeded at something far stranger. It became a myth. And myths, as any psychological warfare expert could tell you, are more powerful than any weapon. The FP-45 did not terrify Nazi officers across Europe, but the story that it did has terrified collectors' wallets for generations. In the end, perhaps that is its own kind of victory. The numbers tell the story. Approximately 1 million manufactured, only a fraction distributed, no confirmed documented wartime kills authenticated in the specialist literature, and one legend that refuses to die.
Thank you for watching the audio. Please subscribe to the channel to listen to more about other World War II military campaigns. Thank you so much.